So, Paul, tell us about your organization, about the Rio Grande Foundation.
Yeah, Rio Grande Foundation is a public policy think tank. We research issues here in New Mexico, and we focus on the broader state economy, trying to get this state, which has so much to offer, to be a pro-growth center in the American Southwest, to compete with the Arizonas, Texas, and of course even Colorado, states that are outstripping us economically. We focus on the education system and trying to boost results in New Mexico's schools. And we focus on constitutional liberties and individual rights. And when it comes to New Mexico's economy, it truly is an energy-driven state. We're a state of just over 2 million people. We're the number 2 oil-producing state in the entire country, and it's been growing really rapidly in recent years due to some finds down in the Permian Basin, which we share with Texas, but the recent finds have been on the New Mexico side of the border. And that's why we've just seen this skyrocketing revenue picture, skyrocketing oil production and natural gas production. And it's something that we believe as an organization that should be used to benefit our state and really make New Mexico a beacon in the Southwest.
So, we are here in Santa Fe right now, which is the capital of New Mexico. We're not close to the oil fields, but metaphorically, we're not close at all. What I mean by that is it seems to me that a lot of the decision makers here in Santa Fe almost look down upon energy, despite it being so important for New Mexico.
Yeah, unfortunately, the policymakers in New Mexico do not understand or care about energy as an issue. They like the money that it spends off and that they get to spend, but they don't understand the importance of the industry. Certainly there are folks who represent the Permian Basin and to an extent the San Juan Basin, which is in the opposite corner, the northwest corner of New Mexico. But unfortunately, it's a numbers game when it comes to politics. And the majority of people elected to our legislature, our governor, are not understanding of the energy situation and how they can use that industry and benefit from that industry for all New Mexicans.
Do you think, Paul, that too many of those decision makers, whether in New Mexico or countrywide, that they have subscribed to a lot of myths, in a sense, to the myths of eco-radicalism?
Absolutely. The Santa Fe is the epicenter in many ways of that mentality that energy is bad, and not just oil and gas, but coal and any other traditional sources of energy, including nuclear, which no other state has experience with nuclear power like New Mexico nuclear industry. And obviously, we're not talking about the Manhattan Project or any of that, but we are talking about ways that we can sustain modern society using these energy resources that we have in abundant supply throughout New Mexico. It really is a state that has every kind of energy, including the wind and solar, which we don't necessarily like as much. They require so many subsidies. It would be something that we would prefer to see equal accounting, everybody across the board. Let's see what competes and wins. And it's certainly not wind and solar in this country or in this state. It's oil and gas and other sources that we could exploit, like nuclear.
This place is blessed with an ocean of fossil fuels right beneath our feet. And yet, this state and a lot of other states has instead chosen largely to devote resources and investments in chasing what I believe are fantasies, like the idea that wind and these ridiculous, ugly windmills, like they can power this modern economy.
Right. Yeah, the Energy Transition Act of 2019 is one of the very worst pieces of legislation you'll ever see. It took New Mexico from a traditional energy-based state and is attempting to push us very quickly into 100% so-called renewables plus battery, and that is not going to sustain New Mexico's economy or its population into the future. Some hot summer day, sometime, we don't know when, but we do know that it will happen because we're simply unable to fuel our society with these sources of energy. It's not the way we need to go. Unfortunately, bills have been introduced in the legislative session, including this past session, that go nowhere because the Democrats control the process and they don't want to hear these kinds of things. One bill specifically would allow combined cycle natural gas plants, very clean burning plants, less than half the CO2 emissions of a coal plant. And it would allow that to be used for clean energy under this Energy Transition Act. It just died in its first committee, and that was that. And bills like that come up regularly, and they just experience the same fate.
Let me ask you more about that natural gas, because it seems to me that that is the most viable solution, because it's the most environmentally responsible of the fossil fuels. We have almost endless supplies in this country of natural gas beneath our feet. Is that, at least until alternatives someday do become viable, is that the primary energy source to power our economy?
Absolutely. If I was advising this governor and trying to achieve some of the goals that she says she wants to in terms of the environment, I would have said, look, fine, get rid of the coal plant, but let's move to natural gas. Now, I mentioned the northwestern part of the state. It's called the San Juan Basin. It's a natural gas heavy basin. They also have, due to the pipeline and lack of those pipelines, a challenge getting that natural gas to the market. That actually is where two of our coal-fired power plants and all the relevant infrastructure in terms of the power lines are up there in the Four Corners. So what they should have done, if I was telling the governor, here's what you should do, I would have said, look, go with natural gas plants to replace these coal plants. Now, one of them, the coal plants, San Juan Generating Station, it's been demolished. It's done. It's gone. There's another one that the enviros are coming after called the Four Corners power plant. We'll see what happens with that. Interestingly enough, the Navajo Nation is very concerned about that because in one of those kind of environmental justice issues from the more right perspective, you have a lot of folks on the Navajo reservation who are able to make very good incomes in very impoverished areas, some of the most impoverished areas of our country. And that also funds their schools and funds a lot of the economic activity that does happen in that reservation. And the policymakers in New Mexico are just looking at it and saying, we're getting rid of it anyway.
Right. And to that point, oil and gas jobs are great jobs, aren't they?
Absolutely. They pay good money. They're physically demanding, but we have a lot of young people who can use that income and use that as a stepping stone if they want to, or stay in that industry for a good long time and make very good money to provide for their families.
Now, Paul, a state over in Arizona, semiconductor manufacturing is being built at a massive scale, basically a city almost outside of Phoenix, to create chips in this country, which is, I think, something that America badly needs. Those factories are going to be powered by natural gas. It seems to me that that natural gas largely should be coming from New Mexico, although that probably requires the permitting of pipelines, correct?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And thankfully, because there's kind of a patchwork of control in New Mexico, the feds have control over some of the energy resources. You have state, and the state land office controls some of those energy resources. And of course, private sector players do as well. But they all rely on the same piping networks. And New Mexico really could be this energy supplying state for the American Southwest and other states. And we are shipping a lot of power out of New Mexico. Sometimes that's what we would want, which is traditional natural gas and oil. And then sometimes they're building massive wind turbines and power lines that a lot of the neighbors don't want, a lot of environmentalists don't want, tribes don't want, again, to ship our wind power over to California and other states.
Yeah. Let me ask you more about that, about the wind. Not only is it not economically viable, but you have just a beautiful topography here in New Mexico. I mean, you really have been blessed. Some of the vistas are some of the most impressive in the world. I view, but tell me your thoughts. I view these giant turbines as really a form of pollution, of scenery pollution.
Yeah, I don't think they are pretty at all. They're certainly not pretty when you get into the large arrays of them. And I've been through some of the largest in the entire world, driving and just windmill after windmill. And yeah, you can argue whether they're more or less attractive than solar. Certainly, solar is not attractive either, and they both have devastating environmental impacts of their own. One's on birds. Well, both of them impact birds, but just the amount of space they take up And yeah, you can have other things in those areas, but you're really occupying a huge footprint with either wind or solar.
Right. And a footprint, by the way, that requires a lot of fossil fuels to produce, ironically, right?
Yeah, they've been shipping recently through Albuquerque. There is a wind turbine manufacturing company located south of town, and they have, among other things, obviously the construction of those wind turbines themselves that requires a lot of materials. But then they're taking these semi-tractor trailer trucks, multiple trucks with these large turbine blades on their backs and going to wherever they're installing them, presumably somewhere out in the eastern part of New Mexico or maybe West Texas. But yeah, there's a lot of energy, traditional energy, that goes into the manufacture, the mining, and all the materials and the shipping, everything that happens. It's crazy to say that it's somehow greener than the other traditional sources.
Right. It sounds to me like it's a scam. Is that too harsh a word?
No, it's not too harsh of a word. If they want to be less of a scam, like I said earlier, eliminate the subsidies and mandates, let the energy sources compete on an even playing field, and then we'll see what comes out on top. But because the government is so involved in subsidizing and mandating at the same time, it's clearly a politically driven scam.
And to be clear on that point, this is not just a New Mexico problem. I mean, all of America is paying for this scam, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And you have multiple layers of government. You have state government, which through this Energy Transition Act, through subsidies and other policies, winds up trying to make wind and solar more attractive. And then you have federal subsidies and other policies on top of that. It's absolutely nuts that we are pushing so hard on this. If they did the same thing for nuclear, I would at least recognize that nuclear is a viable electricity source that is also clean and often ignored. But we don't get that kind of debate discussion about things that actually work.
Right.
Intermittent energy sources all the way.
And with almost a religious-like devotion, I really do believe that there's a religiosity to this, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a whole thing about paganism and the environment and worshiping Mother Earth. And that's, confused to say the least, in my opinion. But what we're really dealing with is a group of people who see specific sources of energy, intermittent energy, as somehow the only realistic and viable thing that they want to see done.
Right.
Again, natural gas is much cleaner. And even Obama, as part of the left as he was, he recognized and believed that fracking and natural gas boom and the replacing of coal with natural gas drove America's CO2 emissions downward for years on end. And it's still really in process because coal is being retired and natural gas is taking on a greater and greater role. So Obama recognized it. Why can't the rest of the environmental movement and the Democratic Party realize that?
So speaking of Barack Obama, and you mentioned how fracking exploded when he was president. It seems to me that he was, and listen, I'm no fan of Barack Obama, but when it comes to at least energy policy, he almost seems like a conservative compared to today's Democrats.
He's certainly a lot more moderate than the Biden administration was. And it seems like the Democratic Party and that mindset continues to go leftward every single day. So I don't know where they eventually hit a wall and decide, yeah, we're going to come back to something resembling sanity here. But it's long overdue. I know that we try to educate people across the political spectrum. I know that, everybody who understands basic energy principles tries to explain to folks on the hard left that, look, your style of life, your iPhone, your automobile, even your electric car, it's going to be nothing without real, good, inexpensive, steady electricity and steady energy.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that it's difficult for our, given the current power demands, it's difficult to meet that demand even right now. But power demand is going to soar because of AI, because of data centers, because of blockchain, right? I mean, the need for power is going up exponentially right now. doesn't that necessitate all the more that we rely on dependable sources, not fantasies, dependable sources of energy?
And if electric vehicles ever do take off, I know that's a political dynamic that's shifted, but energy is the underpinning of everything in our society. And making it more expensive, making it less reliable is a great way to kill the U.S. economy and the global economy. So the economies that function, that are prosperous, that are growing, are all very energy intensive. And yeah, AI is just the latest technology that's going to demand more energy. And right here in New Mexico, we also have droughts. We have a lack of water. We are in a desert. That's a realistic thing. But there are opportunities for things like water desalination and other technologies to help make sure that we do have enough water. Well, that takes energy too. And everything we do takes energy every day in our houses, driving, no matter whether it's, like I said, electric vehicle or traditional gas-powered vehicle, it's all energy intensive. And then around the world, as other nations modernize, they're going to require more energy as well. So there's no going back. We need more energy. We need more inexpensive energy. And yeah, if we're going to be green about it, that's great. I encourage that, especially on the nuclear front. But China's building coal plant after coal plant after coal plant. So this idea that we're going to somehow here in New Mexico or even the United States solve all of these global problems without China doing something and India doing something, it's absolutely crazy.
Let me ask you, speaking of the global economy, Germany, which has earned a reputation as being basically a factory for Europe or for the world, industrial production in Germany is lower now than it was before COVID, because that country has chased this environmental fantasy probably as aggressively as anybody in the world, and is now paying a terrible price, paying a literal sky-high price for electricity, and not nearly enough power to supply an industrial base. And Germany, as we speak, is deindustrializing. Should we take that as a lesson and a warning?
Oh, absolutely. What's happening in Germany is incredible. It's just shocking to see this nation that has such a proud industrial history, and they're taking that and flushing it all away. It's something that I don't envy the people of Germany or the politicians who seem to be bought into this misguided notion that they're going to somehow solve global warming, climate change by cutting their own living standards. And of course, they haven't even done that in real terms, because I understand they've replaced nuclear with some dirty coal plants, lower performing, less clean coal plants. It's just, it's completely mind-blowing and senseless. And I just hope that the environmentalists in the United States and in New Mexico and throughout these other nations, especially Germany, but England as well, that they figure it out before it's too late.
Yeah. Let me ask you about New Mexico. Now, you wouldn't know because we're sitting here in a Tony neighborhood in Santa Fe. But on the whole, it's a poor state.
Absolutely.
And it's a poor state despite having these vast energy resources. So it seems to me that it's bad decisions that make New Mexico poor.
Oh, it's incredibly frustrating. And that's kind of the nexus of our work. With energy, we obviously support free markets, limited government. We support what works at the Rio Grande Foundation. But where we look at New Mexico, we say, well, we've got all of this money flowing in, and what is happening with it? Well, two things. One is the state is spending more and more every year, massive spending growth, especially under this current governor. And then they're sitting on piles of cash like Scrooge McDuck in his money bin. We have $61 billion in various accounts that the state manages. We need to return those dollars to New Mexicans and benefit our state, the residents of the state. And also, obviously, it's my preference that they use those funds in a way and educate the people of the state, saying, hey, this tax cut, this policy that we're able to do is brought to you by the oil and gas industry, because too many people outside of the oil patches here in New Mexico don't understand that. Now, getting blue state politicians who benefit politically, at least as they see it, from the status quo, they keep getting reelected, it's a very tough thing to do. We take our battles to the average citizens of New Mexico and say, hey, this industry carries New Mexico. Without it, New Mexico would be kind of a ghost town. It would just wither up and die. And then saying, hey, this industry, this money that's produced by oil and gas belongs to you and could, if used correctly, really limit or eliminate poverty in the state of New Mexico. We're one of either the first or the third most impoverished state in the entire country. We have real opportunities. Unfortunately, current leadership has not done anything to really boost New Mexico's economy or New Mexicans' standard of living, and that's really sad.
Yeah.